But so I'm here to give you an update on a research project that I did as part of this book. And many of you filled it out. About 120 people filled out this Google Forms. And but before I talk about that, I wanted to give you a brief mention of the book. So you've all been following along, if you've been following along at all, on my Substack. I've been working this book for about a year, Rules to Live By. And I think, if you followed along, like a first draft was finished up in like December, and working on the second draft. And people always want to know, like, how do you do this? Like, what does the second draft look like? How do you work? And so briefly, because it's right here on my desk, what I do is when the first draft is done, I send it out to people for feedback, and a small group of people who are smart. My criteria is smart, opinionated, and honest. And the fourth one is available. Obviously, if they're not available, I can't get feedback from them. But I want people who have a lot of opinions and are honest about them, and they'll tell me what's wrong. And I get feedback from all those people, and I listen to it. But I don't touch the book. I don't look at it. And eventually, I print out the draft, which I have right here. I print out the entire draft of the book, and I read it, and I make my own notes. I cut things out. I slash through things. And then my second draft process is I go through those notes, and I make all those edits. And as I go through, that's what becomes the second draft. I'm about a third of the way through that right now, which is good. Second draft's coming along really well, and wanted to give you a quick update on that. But let's talk about this research. So I'm going to share my screen and give you the summary of all the things I learned, which was really fun. Obviously, I have my own rules for life because that's what I've been writing about in the Substack. There's been like 25 rules I posted. But midway through a book project, I'm in my own head enough. I want to find out what everyone else thinks and get out of my own brain. And this survey has been great. There's lots of interesting bits of rules in here that I never would have come up with on my own. So let me share my screen and show you. Let's see, here we go. Sharing my screen. Okay, let's go to the beginning. All right. Okay, let's see. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. And what did 100 plus people say about their rules for life? It was actually 118. I also wanted to share with you that there's now, I had you folks vote about the title of the next book. I thought I'd slip it in here for the handful of people. I see like 2 other people here actually on the live stream, which is great. I have only 1/3 of the audience paying attention right now, or possibly paying attention. I wanted to share with you what's going to be the title of the book. I had you all vote on the Substack. And the title of the book is going to be How to Live, Rules for People Who Don't Like Rules, which is an enduring theme of the rules if you're paying attention to them, because they're largely about looking at the world a different way. But that's going to be the title of the book. Thought I'd slip that in there as a bonus for people who are actually paying attention. So the survey, it's important when you're doing research to clarify who it was that actually filled the survey out, because that will change how you view what the meaning of the results of the survey are. So 118 people filled it out. Initially, the survey group was pretty slim in terms of gender diversity, but I did more outreach to try to balance it out. It came out pretty balanced, about 60-30, which is closer to what you would hope. Not great, but better than what it was. Age, not a surprise. The ages are anchored in my age. I am 54. So a lot of my network of people who I know or follow me are about my age. But it's a nice bell curve of people who are younger and under than that. And here we are actually into some of the data of the survey. So one of the key questions of the survey was just asking people for a baseline about their sense of rules. So I asked from a scale of 1 to 5, how important is it for you to follow the golden rule or a version of it? And I asked this question because in all of my own research, this is the number one thing people say by far, like not even close. People will say, be kind, or the golden rule, or the fancy version is the platinum rule, which is that you want to treat other people the way they want to be treated, which requires a little more effort. So not a surprise. Most people said it's a 4 or 5. A few people said that it was not that important. And there was one person who rated it too, who I went and read the rest of his results. And he's just a really interesting, opinionated person. I think that he has his own flavor of how to behave morally. It's just he doesn't like the golden rule for a bunch of reasons, which I thought was fascinating. And then the second question in the survey was about how well I asked people their own values on different metrics. And then I asked them, how well do you think you as a person align with your own values? And for 70% of the people, it gave that a 4. And then a little bell curve of people who are lower and higher. And I thought this was also sort of interesting. I've never seen data like this before. I tried to look for other people who had studied it. I wanted a sense of how well people feel they follow their own rules. That's kind of the spirit of this book, is we all know the platitudes. We all know the little quippy things to say about being kind, or don't judge yourself too hard, or think of the future, don't waste any moment. We have a lot, carpe diem. But how well do we think we actually live up to it? And I wanted some baseline of that. And it seemed most people feel they do pretty good, with some room for improvement. A few people, I think, were more honest about their own decision-making in life. That was that question. Now, another question I wanted to get at was just people's sense of their lives, because the purpose of this book, How to Live, is to help people be better at living. So I wanted a sense for how people were feeling about fulfillment with their life, because that is the goal. So the baseline was, how fulfilled do you feel right now? And this is almost a perfect bell curve, which means you're asking a good question that's indexed properly, that there's a spectrum of the way people answer. That's how I look at it from my research brain. But then I also asked the question of how this compares to any other time in people's lives. And this is really interesting, that almost everybody shifted 1 or 2 points higher, which means that in the past, they felt they were more fulfilled than they are now, by like a significant percentage, like 20 to 25%. Now, there's an artifact that I've read before in other books about nostalgia, and that we all have a romanticized view of the past. The way our memories work, we simplify things in the past. And it's a tendency to feel like things made more sense then. And that's reflected here, I think, that we really wish that things were better in a combination of important ways in the past, and we want to return to that. And a lot of this is probably an illusion, is I guess where I'm going. That's just a feeling we have about life and the way memory works. But I'm glad that I captured it. That's something I can poke into more later, about how this affects rules. Like, were there rules in the past that people followed that they're not following now that explains this? That's one of the questions that this leads me to think about. Since I did this survey, I wanted to understand, well, what kind of rules do people want to learn about? Maybe that can help me index the book in some way. But this question I asked about which areas of your life would you like to see the most improvement, was pretty diverse. So I don't know what to pull out of this. It seemed pretty evenly split across relationships and health and personal development. So nothing that I could mine from that. Then I'm going to share with you some of the rules that people had that I'd never heard before, which are cool. But I want to give you one other slice of research first. So I did use some large language models to review the data. Just Google Forms and Google Sheets makes this easy. I thought I'd try. I don't use a lot of AI to do thinking stuff, but it is useful for me in this kind of like analytics. So I asked it for all the rules that were submitted to me. I asked people, what is an uncommon rule? It did break them down by types of rules. And the highest percentage of rules were rules for actions. 40% were about rules for actions. The next 20% of rules that people submitted were about relationships and conflicts. And then it was broken down into about 13% and 11% for just perspective. And if I add that up, it's 25% about perspective, that the rules meant just an internal thing for you, not about behavior, but about how you view the world. And I had never thought to categorize the rules in any way, but it made it so easy to try that this came up, and I'm like, oh, I never thought about categorizing the rules this way. Maybe there's a way to organize rules in the future. The book is not organized in this way, but it did make me rethink that a little bit. And then a similar thing I asked the question, what happened in your life that led to you coming up with the rule? Like, these rules come from somewhere. Like no one other than me, who's obsessed with these sorts of questions, No one goes about in their daily life thinking, what new rules can I make? Like my life is not like structured, or I'm not judging my life enough. Let me come up with new rules. So I asked the question, where do they come from? And it's not a surprise. The highest percentage, which is this percentage over here, personal trauma came out the most. Like, that's really not a surprise. If you forced me or you to guess, you'd probably guess that. But some of it was about interpersonal dynamics, which I thought was interesting. So there's a relationship that failed, or something went wrong at work that led to someone having to reconsider their rules for things. And then, yeah, I'm going to skip this one and just jump into rules that people shared with me. And then if anyone's still around, I'm happy to answer questions or hear your own rules or feedback or thoughts that you want to share with me. So let's see. Trying to see if there's a way I can see the chat room while I'm doing this, but there doesn't seem to be a way I can do that, which is really a flaw in Substack's design. Can I change this? No, I can't. It just mutes me. Okay. Never mind. It's my first time doing live. I apologize. I wish there was a way for me to make this more interactive, but it doesn't seem that there is. Okay. So one of the rules someone submitted, which I thought was, I'm like, okay, like that's a big statement. A lot of people sent the rules were like, life is precious, or don't waste a moment, or lead with love. They're very life affirming. But this one, if you sit by the river long enough, the bodies of your enemies will float by. I was like, wow, this is like the Sun Tzu, Machiavelli category of rules, just very dark and cynical. But it made me laugh, which counts for a lot. This one was interesting. Evaluate every lesson twice. Once when considering the messenger, and once when taking the messenger out. It helps me see when ego is getting in my way. And I'm like, one thing about books like this, the books that are the most successful, these advice books, life lessons, come from people who are very famous. And we are so attracted to wanting to learn from people who we believe have succeeded, and therefore their advice must be good, which it makes sense in one way, but it's also pretty flawed, because those people might not be the best at giving advice. And also, who knows what advantages they had in their lives that allowed them to be successful. So why would we assume their advice would necessarily be any better? But this was interesting about how can you evaluate opinions independent of the person giving it. And that makes a lot of sense. It's more work though, right? Because it's people you trust, and we're social creatures. So it's a lot faster and easier just to base your opinion on who is saying it. But he's pointing out that's often pretty flawed, which was interesting. I had to think about that. This was another interesting one. I try to be clear about the difference between wants and needs, as most things are wants, but not necessarily needs. And there are very few things that I actually need. It helps me feel grateful. That's a profound thing. We get so lost in modern life we get upset when we don't get the job we want, or if we can't get a bigger house, or if our car isn't as cool looking, and we have a very superficial emotional state that we're not grounded, and that creates problems. That's why a lot of us are unhappy. We're unhappy about these very superficial things. But consumer culture and modern culture, and how successful we've been at staying alive, we don't worry about survival, right? So this is a very grounding kind of rule of being humble and having gratitude, which I thought was cool. Maybe the world's not ending. Maybe I just eat a sandwich, which also made me laugh. It's reminiscent of the previous rule that sometimes we have a feeling about the world, but that feeling is a distortion, to use like therapy speak. It's a distortion. It's a cognitive distortion. And we have a feeling of worry or upset or anger, and we want there to be a target for it that's obvious and big, when sometimes it's just, I didn't sleep well, or I need more exercise. There's just something I didn't do, or I need to change something in me, which could be a physical thing, and I'll feel better and the world will seem very different. I like this a lot. This is a very internal like your world is much more an internal one, but we blame and project out a lot. The universe isn't about you. I guess this is a similar sentiment. I wouldn't ordinarily see this as uncommon, but in my experience, I haven't encountered many people who seem to be guided by it. There's a narcissism in humanity. You know, we assume that the sun revolved around the earth because we are on the earth. Like, well, we're here, so this must be the center of everything. You know, it's kind of we tend to default to assuming that we're the most important thing. And whenever I hear people say, the universe wants me to, I'm like, what? like, I can get that as a metaphor, maybe to make you feel a little bit better about the world, but the universe isn't thinking about you at all. Like it's not a system that orients towards humanity to begin with. And even if it did, there's 8 billion people on the planet. So there's no mechanism by which things are organized for you. That may be a way that you can feel more confident about being in the world, and confidence might be good, but the story behind it is an incredibly narcissistic one that I think is probably more dangerous than good. Leave at the first lie. And some of these rules, you know, they come from someone with a story, right? They're like, there's like a story here about something that happened in their life. They're like, don't trust people. Like if someone's telling you, what's the Maya Angelou quote? If someone tells you who they are, believe them, you know, which is raises the question, why don't we believe them? Like, what are we fearful of at judging people that way, or deciding that we need to move on and accepting that we can't get what we need from this person and we'll have to find it somewhere else? This is a complaint. So many times in my life, I'd run into rules that are maintained for the sake of maintaining them and not because they have inherent value. In the book, this hasn't shown up on the Substack, but in the book, there is some critique about the idea of rules and that you can follow a rule for a kind of authoritarian desire that you want to be seen as good in the system. And you're not using the rule from a personal perspective. You're using the rule so you feel like you fit in, which is a kind of rule you can choose. It's like a meta rule about how you decide your rules. But this person's point was that in general, he's actually pointing out a lot of people are not that self-aware, that we're asleep. And most of the rules that we follow are generated by other people. This last one, you know, life is so precious. This is like the golden rule. It's such a universal thing people say. But as a person who's been obsessing about these rules and what they mean, this is a tricky one, because if you really treated every moment as being precious, you'd be stressed out all the time. You would never enjoy anything because you'd be so fixated on every moment. I don't think this is really means what people think it means. I think part of having a fulfilling life is that you have time where you're not worried about how you're using it, where you're relaxing on a beach, or you're going for a stroll and you're taking the long way to work. Now, you could argue that's a way to make life precious, but I think this kind of sentiment discounts the ordinary moments that aren't about being productive or solving a problem or achieving anything, but you're at peace with yourself and you're comfortable even though you're not doing anything. And so, but I think that's the last rule. That's the last rule I'm going to talk about. Let me get out of sharing mode. And interesting. So how do I pop back over here? No. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how I get, here we go. All right. So I believe I've stopped sharing with you all. Hi, Nicole. Yeah, I can see your comment now. It took me a while to figure out that I could slide back into this wider chat view while I was gone. So if any of you are still here, which I hope you are, this is your chance to ask me a question or just say hello. It's been about 20 minutes. I walked you through all of the research that I went through, and I share with you some of the rules that the research came up with. And what I'm going to do is this video will get posted, obviously, and I will probably come up with a more comprehensive Substack post that walks through the highlights of the data that I just did with a little more commentary about the the rules that people suggested and how that fits in to what I have going on in the book. Anyway, thank you all for the folks who tuned in. About 10 of you showed up, which is great. That's 9 more than I expected. But most of you who are watching are probably watching online. So thanks for following along on this project. It's been really fun, and the pace is going to pick up now that I'm on the second draft. So you'll see more videos and more live streams like this from me. But I'm going to sign off now. And hey, Nicole. Hey, look, you're verifying this thing works. Yeah, so the other thing I should say is about 120 people responded. I've been going through over the last week and emailing almost everybody that filled out the survey. Now, I know it was long enough ago now, as Nicole's pointing out, like, you're like, oh, right, I filled out a survey. What did I say? So I'm quoting back to people some of their rules and opinions and sharing my feedback on it, because this has been a really useful survey to get out of my head and to see. So if you haven't got an email yet, you'll get an email from me over the next week or so, probably next 7 to 10 days, because there are so many responses. But look for that. And thanks for following along, and more soon. All right, I'm going to sign off. Oh, hey, Eric. Just read Tiny Experiments. Felt like it speaks again to those that are motivated. Would you be the book for the semi-motivated? There's a trap that's just not solvable about intention in life. And these books tend to give us the feeling of a middle way. Oh, I'll just read the book and that'll fix things for me. But the book can't do that. And the books that promise that are lying to us. So you read these books and you're hoping you absorb it and are able to apply it. But most people really don't. This sounds like a really cynical thing to say, but actually making change in your life requires risk. It requires some kind of sacrifice that most people most of the time really don't want to do. We live such wonderful lives where we're safe and secure, and taking a risk or making a change is just it's really a personal choice. No book or guru can make you do it. And sometimes I think the more that you seek it out in other people, you're kind of perpetuating not doing it, because you're becoming used to the feeling of having someone tell you what to do, which is never really going to get you over the gap completely of the fear of doing it yourself. I talk about this a bit in my book, but I talk about it in like a comical way of like, I can tell you about this phenomenon, but I can't solve it for you. I am the author. You are the reader. You need to put this book down and go, quit your job, or go decide that you're going to take a risk. You're going to, move to a different city. You're going to stop treating other people. Like, you have to make that choice for yourself, and nothing can really do the last part of that. Hey, Khalid, thank you for the thank you. I was doing this solo for so long. I'm sure I have first time Substack live itis. I'm just thrilled to see anyone's name showing up here. But I'm going to sign off now. I do want to do more of these. I like doing live stuff, and this is my first time using the tool, or Substack's version of it. So I'll do more of these, and yeah, thank you. And more stuff will come soon. All right. Bye.